we're going to continue on here with part number 8 here on some general approaches to cancer. And just a reminder that whenever you are working on any kind of a healthcare issue, that you want to enlist in your team someone who has your best interest at heart and also has a similar philosophy of care that you do. What we're providing here is education in the realm of wellness, and whatever we can add to our toolboxes for health and wellness that'll benefit us greatly. So just keep that in mind. Over the last few weeks, we've talked a lot about Jethro Kloss, and I just wanted to let you know who Jethro Kloss was. He was born in April 27, 1863 in Manawatuck, Wisconsin, and died at the age of 83 in Colmont, Tennessee. He was the 9th of 11 children, and he was one of the earliest and most creative soy food pioneers, which he did in the early 20s. And it turns out that I did not know this until putting this presentation together, that he was a very devout Seventh-day Adventist Christian. And he's the author of the book that I've been drawing examples from, Back to Eden. And I looked online today and found that the edition that I have in hand, copies were available for $518 to $542 a book. That being said, Amazon has newer editions that are available for $4 and up. But I found that very interesting, kind of just an oddity that they would have that kind of a price tag on that book. Anyway, this was basically his crowning achievement for his work, his lifetime, and he wanted to share what he'd learned with all the world. He was deeply influenced by the writings of Ellen G. White, and he knew Dr. John Harvey Kellogg personally. He took courses in hydrotherapy, electrotherapy at the Battle Creek Sanitarium, and he studied the laws of life and health and nature, which were the basis of all his teachings. He believed that if caught soon enough, herbs could heal any condition. In the early 1900s, he ran a branch of the Battle Creek Sanitarium in Roselawn, Wisconsin, so he had quite a understanding of health and wellness and hygienic medicine, which is what was practiced at that time. And in 1907, he opened his own sanitarium called the Homestead Sanitarium in St. Petersburg, Minnesota. In 1915, he took over the Nashville Sanitarium Food Factory near Madison College in Tennessee, which then was purchased by Madison College and built on their campus, and he ran it there and helped them set it up. In 1920, he moved to Brook, Virginia, and built another food plant, which he later sold. And in the 20s and into the 30s, he was experimenting with soy-based health foods and products as a dairy substitute, as well as many other things. So in 1926, he moved to Washington, D.C. and opened a store on a market on Carroll Avenue. And he published the first edition of Back to Eden in 1935, basically as a way to share the things that he discovered in the course of his work and the benefits to others that it provided. He updated and republished it in 1939, and it maintained that form into the 60s and 70s. In the early 80s, it was resold. By 1986, it was reprinted, updated posthumously by his children, who have continued to promote his book. Over 3 million copies, and also available in Spanish. So basically, Back to Eden showcases methods of healing that he used throughout his career. The use of herbs, a totally vegetarian diet, eating no meat, eggs, dairy, or fish. We would call that a vegan diet today, because essentially it's the same thing. Although veganism has different connotations in some circles, totally vegetarian has the same dietary outlines. A life lived in harmony with the laws of health and nature, i.e. the 8 laws of health and God being the author of nature. He was opposed to the use of sugar, spices, irritating spices, pepper, mustard, vinegar, and fermented foods. He advocated the use of soy, tofu, and other dairy-like products. And tofu and like miso, for example, those are actually, and other traditional uses of soy have very good benefits associated with them. The modern view is that the phytonutrients in soy, if consumed in excess, can have phytoestrogenic kinds of influences on the hormones. So too much soy product is probably not going to be particularly beneficial. But in balanced tofu, we know there's a long history of use in that in the Asian world, and miso, for example. Those traditional soy foods are well established from centuries of use, as opposed to other soy-based products per se. In Back to Eden, there were a bunch of recipes, and so it was essentially a health guidebook as well as a cookbook in many respects. But in 1974, they actually came out with the Back to Eden cookbook, which basically kind of collected those recipes into one place in a shorter form. So it's a totally vegetarian cookbook. It was published in 1935, essentially one of the first vegan cookbooks that is known to mankind. His desire was to give his findings to the practitioners to aid others. And in fact, he had contact with the American Medical Association around 1939, and they actually invited Kloss, Jethro, to come and share his ideas with them. He also wrote a letter to the National Cancer Institute in Washington, D.C., and it basically gave them, or invited them, to look at his work and have him actually practice that work in their presence so that he could hand off this knowledge base rather than take it to the grave with him. He really wanted to be able to have this legacy move forward of knowledge that others could use for their benefit, particularly in the realm of cancer care, as well as other diseases, infantile paralysis, asthma, pneumonia, heart disease, tuberculosis. Basically, he got a little bit of the cold shoulder, and there were many people, prominent people, who were actually encouraging to do this, and he felt compelled to do so and asked for their advice in aiding him in doing that. The National Cancer Research Institute dropped the ball, essentially. The responding doctor said he wasn't in a position to accept. I think he probably just really didn't even make an effort to do so, and work with his colleagues to make that happen, because there was other things perhaps in their realm of thinking. They essentially punted it to, as the doctor said, some other hospital or practitioner working with cancer patients already who might be willing to work with you. So they really weren't much help in aiding the dissemination of this information that Jethro Kloss had spent a lifetime implementing with success and utilizing. So essentially, his public presentation of his methods and practice manifested itself in the book Back to Eden. Essentially, his methodology uses no poisons, no animal experimentation, and it can help anyone. The keys are persistent and faithful nursing care, so someone there to help the person through the situation, a diet, a whole foods, plant-based diet, water, massage, herbs, sun, air, rest, and exercise. Sounds very much like New Start, which isn't surprising since Ellen White had such a huge influence on his career and practice. So out of that, a successful method of addressing cancer using natural remedies. This is courtesy of Mercy Ballard from Yours Restored, using the same kind of modalities that Jethro Kloss has used through the years. So first thing in the morning, start with lemon water, juice of 1 lemon and 2 glasses of water. Drink that with a straw to prevent any enamel erosion that could take place. Now, we know that lemon juice is an acid. However, as soon as it enters the body, it functions in an alkaline way. It alkalizes the body. When a body tends towards a more acidic state, it's more diseased. It tends toward alkaline state, it is more healthy. We don't want a totally alkaline body because that's not healthy either, but tending alkaline is a more healthy state. Vegetable juice, and again, this vegetable juice recipe is going to tend you towards an alkaline diet just because of its fresh vegetable nature. So 30 minutes prior to a meal, 3 times a day. Chard, collards, spinach, kale. So use this in a juicer and extract the juice from it, and take that 3 times a day, 30 minutes prior to mealtime. Onion broth, 1 cup at each meal, so this will be taken with the meal. So simmer onion in water, and then strain and drink the broth. So basically just a kettle with onion in it, and boil it, simmer it for some time, and then it becomes a very excellent source of quercetin, which is a very powerful antioxidant and healing compound. Apples also have quercetin in them, and there are other foods as well. Then there's the garlic and lemon kind of shot, essentially 3 times a day. So 2 cloves of garlic, juice of 1 lemon, and 4 ounces of water. Blend that up in a little crucible on your blender, and you can drink that 3 times a day with meals, prior to meals, kind of when you can fit it in. And then onion broth number 2. This can be used both as a drink as well as used as an enema, especially if someone has a colon issue that needs some cleansing. So 1 onion in 3 to 4 cups of water, a pinch of sea salt. So that's going to provide the mineral basis. We said that if all the minerals are present that are found in the human body in their appropriate amounts, that cancer can't survive. We also said that pure blood, within pure blood, cancer can't survive. So simmer and strain off the broth, and then use that broth for the drinking and the enema. When using foods that are non-inflammatory, you want to prepare those seeds by soaking them overnight. So the seeds that you're going to be using are going to be like sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds. You can keep those soaked in the fridge for use. Buckwheat. So you want to avoid all things that could be an immune trigger that would have gluten in them. And that's most people. There are lots of sensitivities to gluten out there, some that are subclinical. The gluten today is not the same as it was when wheat was first discovered and developed and used for bread. They have hybridized and selected for particular qualities in gluten, which have made it super gluten, which allows the dough to rise and stretch. No more flat bread. It's all high, poofy, airy bread. And that's basically due to the type of glutens that are used, the gluten compounds, the gluten molecules that are in today's wheat. The ancient wheats like Eichhorn wheat, spelt even, will have a different type of gluten that even gluten sensitive people may not be sensitive to, because it's a different type of gluten matrix. One good recipe to use, and these recipes are largely found in the Autoimmune Plant-Based Diet Cookbook, published by Joyce Cho and Mercy Ballard. It can be found, I think, linked from her website, yearsrestored.com. But the sunflower smoothie once a day, probably at breakfast time, would be a great time. So 2 tablespoons of pumpkin seeds, 2 tablespoons of sunflower seeds, 2 tablespoons of turmeric, and 2 tablespoons of chia, carob powder, 2 tablespoons, half a cup of berries. So you can use whatever berries you happen to have available. If they're frozen, that'll give it a kind of a thicker consistency. If they're fresh, they're good that way too. A Granny Smith apple, it's a good kind of a tart source of a quercetin. And then shredded coconut, 2 tablespoons in 3/4 cup of water. So it looks like not a lot of water, but you're getting the smoothie basis from your apple as well as from your berries. Those are going to add to smoothie consistency. So to wrap up, just after that short little way of addressing, and that can take like up to 4 months or 5 months or 6 months to use those different modalities, and you may want to use them even longer than that as you move through a health crisis. I think there was a page that I missed there. There were some herbs as well that I missed. I didn't include that. So Pardiarco, red clover top tea, astragalus tea is also important, and black seed oil was said to cure anything except death. So very good, especially for colon types of cancers, but other types of diseases and cancer types. The black seed oil is very helpful in that regard. So sorry, I missed that slide. So Thomas Edison said that the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease. Hippocrates has a very famous quote that says, "Let food be thy medicine." And your medicine should be your food, not pharmacological agents. Because food actually can have a pharmacological effect too. Its effects aren't as pronounced and rapid and immediately powerful, typically speaking, than drugs. but they can have more sustained, long-term, powerful health-promoting benefits. And then finally, a quote from Ministry of Healing, page 296, those foods that are eaten should be chosen that best supply the elements needed for building up the body. In this choice, appetite is not a safe guide. Through wrong habits of eating, the appetite has become perverted. Often it demands food that impairs health and causes weakness instead of strength. We cannot safely be guided by the customs of society. The disease and suffering that everywhere prevail are largely due to popular errors in regard to diet. So as we go on through our lives and approach various circumstances that come into our lives or meet people that have various health challenges, we can guide them towards the natural approach to changing the trajectory of our health from one of disease to one of health. And hopefully they can share that with others as they go through life.